them guys can do it, we can do it.
There's a lot that goes into it, and if you're not prepared for it, it could be miserable.
That's one thing that I think you need to put in place before you go.
Don't always let people discourage you. Even if you get into an area and you see other hunters, use those to your advantage.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin Fool magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin Fool today at huntinfool.com.
Welcome to another Built to Hunt podcast. I'm Garth Jensen. I'm here today with Braxton Byers and Isaiah Joner. And today we're going to touch base a little bit on DIY hunts and how to put them together. And this is a question we commonly get asked, especially with gas prices going through the roof, food prices going through the roof, everything costing more along with landowner tags, you name it. It's getting tougher to justify a guided hunt, and that's pushing people to look more at the DIY hunt opportunities. But we wanted to kind of go through that and explain just what goes into a DIY hunt, because sometimes it's not always cheaper. I mean, it depends on your time, too. There's a lot more time and preparation, and there's a lot of gear that goes into a DIY hunt that you might not have. So we're going to kind of go over some of those subjects today and hopefully clear a few things up and give you a better understanding of what you're looking at if you haven't really jumped into do-it-yourself or self-guided hunts.
Yep. And I see Braxton has his notepad out taking notes because he hasn't done many in the past, so we'll get him trained up by the end of this. So basically, like Garth said, we're just going to go over top to bottom on how we kind of plan our hunts. A majority of us here do DIY hunts every year, and a lot of that's trial by error, having unsuccessful, just learning what to look for, whether you're scouting online, talking to buddies. It's an area you've been to before, so there is a lot that goes into making a hunt successful, and hopefully we can help you out with that.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important point there is, a lot of this, you are going to be unsuccessful. Like when you go into a new area and don't have any idea of what you're running into, you can do a lot of e-scouting. You can do a lot of calling, picking guys' brains that have hunted the unit, which is all helpful and going to hopefully narrow down some of those locations you're going to hunt. But at the same time, things change a lot when you get there. It looks different. Maybe those animals have moved off. You might be in a drought year. The guys that hunted it before were in a wet year. There's a lot of different scenarios that you can encounter, and that's probably one thing to start off, like when you start your research. Now, contrary to what Joner said, Braxton, you have done a couple DIY hunts.
Oh yeah.
So let me ask you this: what do you look for when you go into application season? Because ultimately, if you're planning a DIY hunt, there's a reason you put in for that area, right?
Yeah, and honestly, the reasons are changing.
Sure.
I think now is tags are getting harder to draw. So now I'm really looking for what are my best chances because I want to go hunting. And then, once I narrow those specific areas, units down, then I start juggling what are harvest success, everything like that.
So as far as like terrain, things like that, when you start narrowing down, I know for myself, I start to look at what kind of hunts I like to do.
Yeah.
If it's early season, I don't mind doing a backpack hunt. The later it gets, the less I'm inclined to spike out and sit there and have potential for deep, deep snow in late November. And quite honestly, a lot of those animals aren't probably going to be in remote locations. They've probably moved into more accessible locations in lower country. Yep. But, that's what I look for conditions and scenarios that I like in an area to hunt, and a lot of times, that might be limited people. But more than anything, I think it's just having the types of areas within that unit that I can move into, that I can be flexible with, and from there, then I start looking at applying.
Well, yeah, and especially if you have the experience that you have, and you know what you like, you know how you want to hunt, you know on what hunt you're going to be the most successful on because that's what you've learned, that's what you're good at. But, going into it for your first time, you got to get out there and bust butt and, get the tag first. That's the first step is getting that tag. Obviously, there's some tags out there that are going to be very tough. So, there is a ton that go into it that all of us, on every tag that we apply for, it's not just last minute that we're usually throwing in for that hunt. Yeah, there are a few we get invited by a buddy or something and we throw in with them. But most of the time there is a lot of research and a lot of talking to each other, talking to members here at Huntin' Full, whatever it may be. There's a lot of time and research go into a guided hunt, a DIY hunt, but especially when we are, going to go backpacking somewhere and do it yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, it can be do it yourself. You can do it with the draw tag or an over-the-counter tag. But
Yep.
I think today we're primarily talking about, the opportunity hunts, the over-the-counter tags, the 1 to 2 point unit. So
Yeah.
I know for me, when I start looking at that, whether it's a general tag where I can hunt multiple units or it's a draw, a 1 to 2 point unit, is I look for areas that have good options. Like you said, the style of hunt. Like most of my hunts, I like a mixture of, maybe spiking out for a day or two, or maybe covering some more ground from the pickup. So having an area that you can pre-scout where you leave your options open. I think early on when I first started hunting, I would get so committed to one area because I did all this research there that when I went hunting, that's where I was going to hunt. And I was afraid to leave, but it's like, I think there can be a fine line of where you bounce around too much and don't wait it out. But I also think, having options and plans to where, yeah, I'm going to run in here for 2 days. If I don't see anything, I'm going to pull out and go over here for another day or two. And leaving your options open. So, I mean, you could show up at a trailhead with 10 pickups parked there.
Yeah.
And your option A could be scratched off the list right away. So leaving it open-ended, I think, is a big thing, especially if you're coming from out of state and have never seen the country before.
Well, let me ask you this. I know how I kind of go into it, but just to take a step back, how do you come up with your options? Let's say you've never been there, but it's a hunt either you've drawn or you didn't draw anything and you bought this over the counter. How do you come up with your options A, B, and C? Let's say, for instance, a deer hunt in October. It's something that you put in for. Now you've got to look at the situation and say, okay, I'm in this unit. How do you come up with those A, B, and C's?
I don't hunt deer in October. So, no. I mean, most of the hunts, DIY hunts, I mean, I do deer hunt in Montana, but it's typically elk. But a lot of it.
Okay, then let's say elk hunts then.
Yeah. So for any hunt, I mean, I start looking at units, terrain. If I have the option to pick from several different units, I personally like hunting old burns, where that's kind of the first thing I narrow down is the habitat in an area. I mean, obviously it can range from sagebrush flats to high alpine and everywhere in between. So I guess you just have to start looking at, where's the best feed in this area? Where's the best habitat, cover? Where are these animals going to go when they get pressured? So a lot of that is a skill you develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone to places that I was like, man, this is going to be the money hole. And you get in there and it's a freaking ghost town.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is, boots on the ground experience, the time of year. But for me, I start with habitat and then glassing ability, like finding an area where, I know I can throw up and cover a bunch of country, because if you let your eyes do the walking for you, it's going to save you a lot of time and energy if you can glass multiple basins from a vantage point. So I usually mark glassing points, burns, pockets of timber, and, that's initially how I start my scouting.
And I think that scouting, I mean, it is a good point that you mentioned time of year. I mean, it is going to change every week running through. We're not going to be scouting the same or looking at this, getting our ABC in the same country for a Colorado muzzleloader deer hunt as we are for a Colorado third rifle. So, it really is going to depend on what time of year is going to depend on where we're looking.
Yeah. Well, that's important. I mean, the one thing I will say that doesn't change in what I look for, I'm similar. Like, regardless if I'm looking at an archery elk hunt in September, I hate. Well, I don't hate, but my least favorite hunting option is to put myself in an area that if the bulls aren't bugling, I have no recourse.
Mm-hmm.
I like to be in those areas, like Joner said, that I can get up and at least I can have an opportunity to glass them up if they're not vocal and if they're not communicating. At least that leaves me another option. So I like to have an area that at least there's some parks, meadows, a little maybe more scattered timber pockets, in with some dense timber, obviously, because that's where they like. But I like to leave those options open, but I'm going to leave those same options open and find areas that have good vantage points where I can glass a lot of country from one specific location. And I'll mark a bunch of those different locations within that area or within that unit during a third season November mule deer hunt.
Right.
I like to glass, and I don't like hunting that really super thick timber. It's sometimes it can be unproductive for me.
Well, I mean, you're limited.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we're talking about elk, they have to be talking. Or yeah, you don't have. I mean, you're looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. So that is one thing I would say that all of us can agree on, is to leave as many options open when it comes to e-scouting and start looking for areas. And once you've narrowed those down, then like you said, different areas within, even if you have multiple units, maybe this unit over here you can hunt as well, and it provides the same type of opportunity there. If the first one you roll up into has 10 different trucks parked at the trailhead, you can kick over to this other area, and if that plan B, then plan C, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing to consider when you go into it versus like a guided hunt. The guide's already done that for you, so you don't have to worry about that.
No, and that is the one thing, and like I tell guys too a lot of times that they're unsure if they want to go guided or not, and it's like, if you have the ability to hunt and hike, like I like the DIY option in a sense because it's something you can do, or I shouldn't say DIY, but these easier to draw tags. It's something you can do more frequently. And not very often are you going to hit a home run the very first time you go out. It does happen, but a lot of it's just gathering data. Okay, I went here this year, didn't see much. You might talk to someone that had hunted the same area. They saw something over here. So it's, years of collecting data. And like where I grew up in Montana, I hunted Southwest a lot, and I have a couple areas that I know always, like, doesn't matter what time of year I go in there, how much pressure, I'm always going to run into elk. But I also like to be somewhat adventurous and try to find the next, sweet spot, secret spot. So I always like to kind of go venture out a little, but kind of save a backup plan. Like, I know if I go back in here, I'm probably going to be into something. So, just collecting data over years, talking to people, online forums, calling in here. There's a lot of information at our fingertips these days.
Way more than when I started.
Oh yeah, and I think a good point is like don't be scared to get your butt kicked. Going in there and getting your butt kicked can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Now you've just told yourself what not to look for. You've learned something, so you're going to get your butt kicked a lot. Going to different places, you still might harvest, or if that's what you call a successful hunt, you still might be successful, but being successful, you're going to get your butt kicked a lot going into new places for sure.
Well, building on that, like you said before, that's what's important to me is you can build on that information from year to year because you can draw these tags easily. You can go on these over-the-counter hunts, every year if you wanted to, so long as the state doesn't change the regulations on you.
Mm-hmm.
But well, let me ask you this then. Like, just talking about guided hunts versus unguided hunts, like what are some things I'll tell you this. These are some things that I think if you're used to going on guided hunts and you're looking at the do-it-yourself option, or if you're trying to figure out which one is cheaper, and if you're trying to save money in the long run, is it actually cheaper? So what are some things going into it, some expenses that guys don't really think about going into a DIY hunt? Like, for me, I think one of the biggest things is gear.
Yeah, I mean, up front for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously over the years you build up is going to be a lot cheaper, but you look at a tent right now. a good tent if you're backpacking in $500. I mean,
Yeah.
stuff, gas to get there, which you got to pay for gas either way, but gas to run your own truck around scouting, doing all that. I mean, there's a lot of expense into, I think, either way, you outfitted or DIY, but all of your gear in a DIY hunt, depending on what you're going to do. I mean, you got to have a good pack to pack that bull or deer out. If you kill him back a couple miles in there, you're not going to want just a cheap Walmart JanSport. You're going to want something different. What are packs nowadays are $600 to $800.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, you look at transportation, side by side, four wheelers, optics. I mean,
Weapon.
It all adds up. And I mean, I tell guys a lot, like, it comes down to time and money typically. Like, if you have the time and the ability, like, go on a, you can go scout. You can be there for 2 weeks. You can be there 5 days before season. Like, all of that helps. But if you're like, hey, I have 1 week of vacation, you're looking at, okay, say you're coming from Pennsylvania to Colorado. Well, you've just burnt 2 days up and travel
Yep.
or more. And then you're trying to, learn an area. And then you got, like I said, your fuel running around. Like, some of these, I mean, guided hunts are getting more expensive. But you still can do stuff for, $5,000 for a decent hunt. I mean, and then you got drop camps. But, it all adds up the time you, like I said, drive out. Then say you stay in a hotel a night or two. Then all your food for the trip, whether it's freeze-dried or you're camping at the truck and eating out of a cooler, pretty quick, all of a sudden you're at $2,000 to $3,000.
Oh,
before you
adds
know it.
up fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
think
I mean, yeah, like, there's other, added stress you put on there. Like, okay, I've never been to this area before. Like, you could get your butt kicked the first day, and then all of a sudden you start having second thoughts of whether you made the right decision on where to be. Like, a guide, an outfitter, they're putting in time preseason. Typically, it's an area they've hunted for, multiple years. Then you got, packing out an animal. Like, if you're by yourself, packing out an elk is a big project.
Yeah.
Whether it's a mile or 5 miles. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Oh, some of the nastiest freaking packouts I've had have been like a mile to a mile and a half,
Mm-hmm.
where like it's just far enough that when I was on my way up the canyon or up on this mountain, it didn't seem like that big a deal when I had a 40-pound pack on when I was getting up there. But when you're coming off of that with an 80-pound pack or a 100-pound pack, it sucks, and you will be shot by the time you get. And if it's an elk, you got to figure, man, that's not going to be one trip.
Yeah.
It's going to be 2, 3, 4. However much weight you can take down that hill is going to determine how much you're going to have coming off of there. And depending on how where your physical fitness is, you might not get that last load before it starts to spoil if it's an early season hunt.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, that's all of this. I mean, packing the elk out, for the DIY guy, there are packing services. That's more of an expense if you wanted someone to come in and help you. But it comes down to, what do you want to experience out of the hunt? Are you only going to be happy and think it's successful if you kill an animal going into a new unit? You probably might want to think about hiring an outfitter, or you might be disappointed.
I thought this was a DIY hunt.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to go in there and have a good time, whether you kill or you don't, and learn and put the effort in, DIY is the way to go.
Yeah, your expectations obviously are different. They should be different,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're basing all your expectations on a harvest, on a first DIY hunt, or even second, third, or the first time in the area, that's some pretty lofty expectations. I mean, depending on the type of unit, obviously you draw a Henry Mountains tag, you're like, well, I'm going to do it myself, and I want to kill a nice 4-point buck. You're probably in pretty good shape. I mean, I think you're going to accomplish your goal. But you go an over-the-counter hunt in Montana, or I guess a general Montana tag for elk, you want to kill a nice 6-point bull on that first time out, you better get after it, and you're going to have a little luck on your side to accomplish that goal. So, for sure, I mean, I guess just going back to like when you were talking about hiring a packer, that's one thing that I think you need to put in place before you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
And a DIY hunter, that's something that you got to research yourself and figure that out. And you got to go through the steps and processes to figure out, okay, even the same thing if I'm flying into like you're coming from New York and you're flying into Denver. You've got to figure out a rental car. You've got to figure out, okay, is the area I'm hunting, what do I need? Do I need four-wheel drive to get into there, or I just need a two-wheel drive to get me to the trailhead and go? If you're going to hire a packer, you're going to have to find that packer's information out before you go. And then you're going to have to figure out, okay, does that guy, does he text communicate so I can use my Garmin to get a hold of him, or am I going to have to get cell service? How am I going to get him the location? You're going to have to go through all of that with that packer, and this is before you harvest, because the last thing you want to do is be stuck on the mountain with a dead bull or a buck and then be trying to figure out if you can communicate with that guy or not.
Mm-hmm.
That can lead to disaster and frustration
On
of
both ends.
epic proportions.
No, that's one thing. I mean, a big thing looking at it is what kind of cell service do you have in the area? Do you need to bring extra fuel with you? Are you going to where if you're running around, you don't need to go back to town? You know, a lot of, too, like say we're three hunting together on a 7-day hunt. I shoot a bull the first day, and
Unlikely.
I have all this meat. Like, what are you going to do with that meat for the next 7 days if
Yeah.
it's 85 degrees?
That's a good point.
So having, there's a lot of little research that goes into it that, I mean, sometimes you don't figure it out until you're in the moment. You're like, oh, crap. I probably should have thought of this.
Done it.
And we are trying to help everybody think about all these things, but there's things that we've been on a lot of hunts, some together, and we forget something every time because every hunt is different. There's going to be something that last year's hunt you didn't need, and then you don't take it, and you go on this hunt a few months later and next year, and you need it.
Well, I mean, even take it a step further, what if you get a flat tire? Are you prepared to handle that? What if your battery goes dead in your vehicle, Garth?
If it's a rental car, I'm in trouble. I'm calling AAA.
Like us in Colorado, we sat around for how long and waited for someone to come by to jump us?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of crap that can happen. I mean, it usually doesn't, but it can. That if you aren't looking at every possible scenario, it could ruin your hunt pretty quick.
Well, and truth be told, that's the thing is that time when we got stranded right there in Colorado, I mean, worst case scenario, we jumped on our four-wheelers and drove 20 miles on a paved highway to go get a battery. But the bad thing is I had a power pack to jump it. The only problem was it wasn't big enough to jump a diesel. So, I mean, the first thing I did when I got home was buy a power pack that could jump a diesel. and then I bought a little set of, prongs that would plug into my generator that would charge my battery if I left the generator on. But those are things that, say, trial and error, like to your point earlier, I had to fail and not have the right equipment to realize, man, this is something I need. But, yeah, you're going to run into situations that's just going to leave you scratching your head.
Yeah. It's like you never bring 2 spare tires until you get 2 flats.
Yeah, and then you're like, God. But I'll tell you what, as soon as you get that first flat, when you've been in that situation, the next gas station you go by, you're looking to repair that flat.
Yeah.
Because inevitably that's going to happen again.
Mm-hmm. So you get to the we've got the tag, we've been planning, we got our multiple places. What next? What's the next thing you're looking for in preparing for a DIY hunt?
Like, are you on the hunt at this point? Have you already went through the process?
I have pulled up. Plan A did not work out because Isaiah told me to go here, and there's 10 trucks. So now I'm going to Plan B.
Hey, the biggest bull I ever shot with a bow, there was 10 trucks at the trailhead.
Yeah.
I just went for a morning hunt because I was like, what the heck?
Because they all walked
I'm
right
here.
past
I'm
us.
just going to go. And some, I mean, again, sometimes it's not all hunters. What if it's hikers, campers?
Yeah.
Like, don't always let people discourage you. Even if you get into an area and you see other hunters, use those to your advantage. Like if you see they're making a play on an elk or a deer or whatever, and it's like, man, where are those animals going to go if they spook them or if they miss? Or like use that type of stuff to your advantage. Just because there's other hunters in the field doesn't mean it's going to ruin your hunt.
To your point, though, going back on an earlier point you touched on, that's from your experience.
Yeah.
Because you probably rolled up to a few trailheads and were like, there's 5 trucks here. I'm just going to go to the next one. And then you burned half the morning, get to the next one. By the time you got there, it was, you're halfway into the afternoon, and now it's the worst time ever to be out looking for elk, deer, what have you. They're all bedded up at that time frame. So now you just wasted the entire morning. And somewhere along the lines, you probably said, screw it, and said, I don't care where these guys are at. I'm just going to march up in here, and I'm going to go where I was going to go in the first place, and we'll see what happens. You went up in there, and it was successful, and you're like, I'll be damned. It doesn't matter if there's a bunch of guys here. Like, sometimes that can screw you over, but at the same sense, you learned over time in doing these do-it-yourself hunts and learning, like say, you failed, you did something wrong, you learned from it.
Oh, there's been countless times where I've gone on a hunt, and I get there, and, like, I start having second thoughts, like, it doesn't look right. My gut's telling me this or that or the other. And then you, like, kind of go into panic mode. You're looking over your maps. You're trying to call someone or, hey, this and that. Like, at the end of the day, just trust your instincts. Like,
100%.
There's been countless times where I've been wishy-washy about should I or shouldn't I hike in here? And if you just listen to your gut at the end of the day and just, like, sometimes just go for it. Like, it may or may not pay off, but most of the times, I can recall 6 hunts where I've had that happen, where I was just like, I might go somewhere else. And then I just manned up and went for it, and it worked out in my advantage.
So I guess to circle back, don't count out the trailhead that you pulled up to. You just got there. You did all your research. Everything should have lined up. You got there, and there's 10 trucks at the trailhead. At least give her a shot, or at least evaluate the situation. Go up the trail. Stick to your original plan until it suggests otherwise. And then you get to your spot, and the 2 different canyons you're looking at has teams of hunters rolling down through there doing drives.
Hey, they might be able to help you pack your animal out.
but if you deem that, hey, now this area is a wash, I'm not going to invest the length of my hunt in this area. That's why you have a plan B. That's why you have a plan C. But God, there's been one thing it does come down to, in my opinion, after you have to start reevaluating where you're going or things didn't work out, you just have to be willing to put in the effort at that point, because it's going to come down to effort.
On a DIY hunt, a huge part of it is effort.
Yeah.
You look at Colorado, second rifle. How many people are in the field chasing elk on over the counter? Tons. You hike a little bit further than them. You put in the effort. A lot of those guys are there just to get away from work and have a good time. Totally fine with that. But if you want to get after it and go in there, there's a ton of elk to be found all over. Effort, that's what it comes down to, especially on a DIY hunt.
DIY hunt, that is the one thing I will say that can make the difference between a successful hunt and at least a successful hunt in harvesting and not harvesting. Just getting out there every single day, putting in the same amount of effort. And it's hard. Gosh dang. There's tons of mornings that you don't want to get out of bed, that you look at the situation, you're like, man, I'm just going to sleep in here. I didn't see anything yesterday morning anyways. It's cold. It's miserable. It's socked in. And you just hit the snooze button or decide, nah, I'm going to take the morning off. That could have been the morning. That could have been the morning. And you'll never know until you get out there. But with DIY hunts, that's what it all comes down to. You went to all that effort, everything to get out there, put yourself in that position. You got all the gear. It's not cheap. The least you could do is get after it every single day. And if you don't maintain that motivation and the same level of effort, you're probably not, I don't want to say you're not cut out to do self-guided hunts, but you probably need to enlist a couple buddies that have a little more motivation than you to keep you going.
If you're hunting with people, it's best to find people like-minded that are willing to embrace the suck, want to go hard, can lighten up, can joke when things really suck. Like having someone, I am not a big solo hunt. Like, I like to solo hunt, but I like to camp with someone.
Exactly. Yeah,
Because you
for
can
sure.
come back, you can build off each other, you're sharing stories from the day, like, the comfort of someone else there, someone to talk to. Like, I enjoy that, but like when I hunt, I like to hunt by myself.
Yeah.
But like these hunts where I go by myself and hunt and camp, like usually, like they're just not as fun for me.
Yeah, I
Well,
would agree.
And
with
you
that.
make stupid decisions because it's easier for you to talk yourself out of something
yeah.
yeah.
when you're by yourself than like bouncing it off of someone.
With all that too, though, I can promise you, because I've been there. If you went on your drive home, it's been a tough hunt and you got your butt kicked. But if you gave up, or in your mind you didn't give it your all, you feel a lot different than driving home thinking, man, I went down to the wire. I did everything that I wanted to do. I checked everything from e-scouting. You feel a lot better than
I've done
sissying out. I mean, I've left 2 days early, and it's just like halfway on the drive home, you're like, dang.
Well,
you damn
that's where
near
if
want to
you're-
turn around,
Yeah,
huh?
if you're with someone too, you're a little more committed. Like
Yeah.
there are times when a hunt's not going as planned where I sit there and be like, I miss my family. Oh, I could be doing this. Like, and then you talk yourself out of it, and then you get home, and then like the next day you're like, son of a,
yeah.
if I just would have stayed.
It doesn't suck as bad as you think it does in the moment.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say, I would encourage everybody, like, if you're thinking about doing a hunt by yourself, do it. Like, try it out.
Mhm.
See how you enjoy it. See if you click with it. I've done it. I don't mind it, but it's not something I enjoy doing as much as having a friend there with me, having a buddy, having something. Then we're both invested into it. Like Joner says, you can bounce ideas off. That's the tough thing. That's where I understand where he says I like to camp with people, but I like to hunt by myself, because inevitably you're going to be like, listen, I've followed this. We've went, even if you haven't went along with every idea in your mind, everything that didn't work out was your buddy's idea.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, I just can't follow this guy around any longer.
Yep.
You do your thing and I'm doing my thing.
Yeah. And, with the buddy thing, especially on a DIY and going into a new area, unit, whatever it may be, covering country.
Yeah, that's true.
You're spread out. You're looking at different things. I mean, that helps a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Let your buddy go find the animals,
Yeah,
and then you move in as number one shooter.
that's right.
That's hunting with Isaiah.
No, and another thing, I mean, I tell guys often is, if you want to get your feet wet, maybe starting with an elk hunt isn't your best bet.
Yeah.
It's a big project, butchering an elk. Deer, it can be hit or miss. I think a spring bear, fall bear hunt is a great way. I mean, typically, there's good populations out west. You're going to probably see more than one animal you want to shoot. It's fairly low stress. The tag costs are cheaper. You can do backpacking or truck camping or whatever, but it's even a good way to go figure out an area. Like if it's an area you're already thinking about hunting for deer or elk, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll run out there this spring and see what it's like for bear. And then you can start gathering data on like, this trail I hiked up, I want to take my bike down it, but they haven't cleared it in 6 months, so there's blowdown everywhere. Oh, there was a new burn here. Oh, this road's washed out. Like a lot of that stuff, it's from, again, just being in the field. And, there are other opportunities besides just going for elk right out of the gates.
Well, and I will say this, as far as using an elk as an example as your first do-it-yourself hunt, especially if you're coming from an area or a state where a lot of the animals that you've harvested, you just pick them up and go straight to the processor with them. And a lot of Midwest and back east, that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the processor takes care of all that. He's the one that's quartering your animal, separating all the meat, and butchering it for you. If you get out here on a deer hunt or antelope hunt, you might be able to figure it out. It's going to be a little bit of a pill to be able to do it. But you dive into an elk as your first one that you decide you're going to figure out how to quarter and debone. it's going to be a mess.
Well, how was it on your DIY moose hunt this year? First time you'd ever done it. You did a lot of research. You were with some buddies.
Yep.
And you're a very successful seasoned hunter. But was there a big difference? Like, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked. Like, once we all had it in our mind, I mean, I'll be honest, like, the effort, he got a moose, right? Like, my buddy shot a moose, which was awesome. I was very happy, and one in the hand's better than two in the bush. But, honestly, we got caught up watching too much freaking YouTube and seeing guys pack out, moose 2.5 miles and thought, well, hell, them guys can do it, we can do it. So, we shot a moose a little bit further than we should have. Thank God we had 3 of us to get it out, but we were working on that thing for 3 days, just shuttling meat, getting it all the way down and getting it all the way to the lake, and it was an absolute nightmare. Now, after that, it was like, okay, we were looking for moose in a lot different locations, but who knows what that would have been if we would have said, you know what, that moose is a little bit too far. Like, there's better options, or let's take the next 3 days we would have been packing that moose out and just, look in better locations that are a little bit more easier, a little closer to the lake, so that if we get one down, we can get it taken care of in a little bit more of a timely fashion and not burn half the hunt just packing that thing out. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there was a definite eye-opening, and going back now, I would do things different.
Well, again, you're talking about packing a moose out in Alaska. I think for the DIY guy, a thing is Alaska has some different rules and regulations. You had to do a little bit more than you might have to in some lower 48 states or something. So for the DIY guy, study the regulations where you're going. True. Because if Garth would have treated that moose the same as he would have a Colorado elk or something, he probably wouldn't have been legal.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're 100% right. Like, that's something that you should do regardless if you go on a guided hunt or a self-guided hunt, but it's way more apparent you have to do that on a self-guided hunt. And know your rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. Like, know if you can or can't use treble hooks in the lake.
No private land boundaries.
Yeah. Those are all things you have to take into consideration, because when you're going on a guided hunt, I mean, most guys, I would say, just look at their outfitter.
Yeah.
And then there's like, well, I'm assuming that he knows all the rules and regulations and he's going to keep us honest.
And it's something to look at every year, because as we know here, because we try to keep up with it the best we possibly can, it's always changing.
It changes. Like, I mean, a good friend of mine went to New Mexico, same thing. Shot an elk. Every other state, they try to take the most meat they can. Didn't take the neck meat. Well, that's a rule in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. It's not in Utah. It's, as far as I know, it's not in Colorado. I mean, there's a lot of western states you don't have to take the neck meat. New Mexico, you do. So, like, say, all of a sudden, here's a game and fish officer saying, "Hey, where's the neck meat?" And you're like,
"Ate it."
I ate it with my ramen last night. So that's a very good point.
Yeah. Mine had an arrow in its neck this year, and it was really rotten. So,
but even on that, guiding and doing a lot of hunts that I do, if I know there's something, like, for example, you shot a bull that had been previously shot, you don't have to take that neck meat because it's no good.
Yeah, not salvageable.
I do still take pictures of that on my cell phone, because either you're going to have to hike back in there and prove yourself, or you got a picture to show him. So that is something on my hunts, guiding, whatever. If you know something could be a little gray, it's better to go ahead and take a picture and prove yourself. So, because that's going to be the one time that game warden does pull up at your truck and say, "Show me the neck meat, Isaiah." Oh, well, the bull was running around with an arrow in its neck. How many times has he already heard that?
If you run a elk into the processor and you have the antlers in camp, like having a note or something that shows, "Hey, I did drop this off. I didn't just leave it up there and it's wasting away." So
yeah, and having people take that meat, 9 times out of 10, if someone is transporting that animal for you, they have to have a note.
Right.
Like, Alaska has an official form that you have to fill out to do that. But all of these things do go back to, okay, if you're going to do a self-guided do-it-yourself hunt, these are things you have to know going into the field.
Well, even transporting it back across state lines.
Yeah.
Like some states are cracking down on, the CWD and no brain matter and
spinal fluid, everything. You got to. Yep.
So, no, there's a lot of work that goes into a DIY hunt. I mean, it can be fun and rewarding, but
if you're prepared. I mean, I think that's one thing that we want everyone listening to know is we're not trying to scare you away. We're not trying to push outfitted hunts on you. Heck, we love going on DIY hunts. We want you to, but there's a lot that goes into it, and if you're not prepared for it, it could be miserable.
And honestly, like, you're never prepared for every scenario.
Exactly.
So don't think that we're saying, hey, you have to be prepared for every single thing if a tornado rips through your unit and starts blowing your tent away. No, that's but just learn from it.
I do usually have a backup tent in my truck.
You would.
I hope not. I hope a tornado is not the reason, but
why don't you just use your truck as a backup tent?
Because I like to go backcountry, Garth.
Oh. No, I mean, I would say a very overlooked piece of gear that I think anyone should have if you're going out west to do a hunt is some type of in-reach device.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot of areas that you don't have service. I mean, it could save you from having to walk 15 miles on foot. Like, you could slip and break a leg and, text your buddy. I mean, just having something like that is pretty good insurance. I mean, and there's multiple plans you can pick from, whether,
1 month, a year. I mean, It's definitely worth it.
And cheap. Like, you can get them for as cheap as $20 a month and cancel that when you're done with your hunt, and now you're stuck with a $20 bill. But if you get stranded, like, I don't even care if you just do the preset messages and it's like, you want to scare
help.
You want to scare the shit out of your wife one night and you're like, hey, need help or send help now. But it sends a location, like, they know where you're at. They know where everything's going on. I mean, it's a peace of mind.
For that, and we have heard, luckily I don't think any of us sitting right here has had anything terribly go wrong on a hunt, but it could.
Mm-hmm.
And having that Garmin could, save your life.
Yeah, you got the Garmin, the Zoleo. I mean, those both have the Iridium satellite, so they're going to work pretty much anywhere you take it.
Mm-hmm.
They have multiple plans to choose from. They weigh essentially, a handful of ounces. The batteries typically last 3 to 5 days, depending on how much you use it. And they Bluetooth to your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just a good little device that could save a lot of hassle in the long run.
Yeah, it's definitely something that for the cost of it and what you get out of it, it's not the most expensive part of your hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I know everything adds up. But once you buy that device, you have it. And like I say, you can turn it on and off and use the plan whenever you want.
Or you could be like Jared that just refuses to buy one and then
but everybody around
yours.
him has. Yeah. You could use your buddy's plan.
Well, there is an on and off button that I've reminded him that you can just choose not to turn it on or turn it on when you need it.
Yeah.
But again, like, he's just grasping the concept of Instagram and social media and that there's actually HD TVs now.
Mm-hmm. He's coming around, though.
Yeah.
He'll have one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that covers a lot of it. We're always here, happy to help to an extent. We don't wave a magic wand. But, yeah, there are areas that are better than others. There are species that are better suited for other people. And there are a lot of things you need to know going into it. And, just making sure you're capable, physically capable of handling something before you go think you're Superman and can tackle it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that DIY doesn't mean don't call, don't try to get help. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Yep.
Ask a buddy to go with you. Ask people around you. Call us. We'll help you in any way we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions if you've never done that. And there's, we can help with that learning curve for sure.
Yep.
We can give you ideas and advice on different things you're looking at, and maybe, like you're saying, maybe what state is right for you, maybe what animal is right for you, for your level of experience at this point. So absolutely take advantage of us.
Well, like Garth said, call, take advantage of him. He's the main hunt advisor here, so he's happy to answer all your questions.
Yeah, but if you've noticed, Garth has started delegating a lot of work.
Now, we all collectively have great experience in different areas, different species. That's what makes it great working here is, the same hunts Logan does every year aren't the same hunts I do or Garth. We come from a mixed bag and try to get out as much as we can. So collectively, hopefully we could help you out. So if you have any questions, give us a call at 435-865-1020 or jump on our website. We'd be happy to help you.